take a slightly broader look at film today to discuss an ongoing problem in Hollywood, commonly known as the strong female character, or more specifically, Now, this is hardly the first video that someone has made about the Mary Sue, but in my research for this video, I realized that most content about this subject, it's not very comprehensive, and that the people that make this content are very unwilling to discuss the more distasteful aspects about the problem at large. Even worse is that when a channel does, it's done in the most distasteful ways. Well, not me. I plan on being very honest about what the Mary Sue problem really is, without filling my video with angry vitriol. So let's take a look at the Mary Sue character type and delve into all aspects from its definition and maybe a few ideas of what to do to fix it. The Mary Sue is a modern character archetype that was first coined by Paula Smith in a parody Star Trek fan fiction story that appeared in 1973 in the Star Trek fan magazine, or fanzine, named Menagerie. The idea of the magazine was that it was a place to publish fan short stories, otherwise known as fan fiction, that took place in the Star Trek universe. The parody short story of Mary Sue was the editor's jab at the large number of stories that were being submitted to the magazine for possible publication, where the main character was a strong female that was young, beautiful, good at everything, and beloved by the ship's crew in the most preposterous ways. Sound familiar? By the magazine's 10th issue, the would-be writers still hadn't got the message. Big surprise. So the editors decided to release some guidelines for the prospective authors. Wouldn't you know it? At the top of the list of things the editors asked the writers to refrain from was the Mary Sue archetype. I mean, just how bad was it to be at the top of the list? The editors of the magazine called them placeholder fantasies of the fans writing these stories. In other words, they were personal fantasies or desires with the writer in mind, playing out scenarios or unrealistic daydream-like stories with a more idealized version of the writer as the protagonist. It's like writing out your own fantasy where you're the hero of your own story, you have no flaws, and everybody loves you. The Mary Sue archetype has become the standard issue archetype for female characters today, and almost every single one of them is portrayed as a strong female character with typically masculine traits that succeeds at the expense of the men around them. But that's what we see on screen. What is it really? What is a Mary Sue? It's kind of easy to explain that Mary Sues are just great at everything and that everybody loves them, as stated already, but that's kind of a shallow explanation of what the Mary Sue archetype actually is. A better and more nuanced explanation of the Mary Sue archetype is to understand that it's not actually an archetype at all, but rather that it's a story trope, and that distinction is pretty important. This misunderstanding of the two words is one of the reasons why so many people that defend Mary Sue characters play whataboutism with the hero archetype, which is distinctly not the same thing. And while they may not use the exact phrasing that I am, liberal media definitely thinks that Mary Sue's and the hero archetype are the same thing. Let me explain why they're not. Archetypes are timeless and perfect versions of a character type that actually exists in human interactions, that throughout all of human history, these archetypes will exist. There will always be a hero, or a sage, or a caretaker, to give a few examples, in stories because these archetypes are inherent in our own human lives, regardless of space and time. In other words, archetypes exist in stories because they exist in real life. Mary Sue's do not. So then the question becomes, what is the difference between this hero and this Mary Sue? What makes this acceptable and this ridiculous? Well, it's not totally gender. I mean, let's face it, that is a part of it, and a much more nuanced problem that most people just don't want to talk about today. It's not even that the Mary Sues are great at everything that they do. That's only 2 ingredients, and it typically takes 3 ingredients to make a Mary Sue. The final ingredient is how the characters in the story interact with the protagonist, and that's what we're going to talk about here. The argument that Luke and Anakin are also Mary Sues is incorrect. The critics that compare Rey to Luke as being the same thing are confusing an archetype with a story trope, and a misunderstanding of those definitions can lead someone to believe that these are actually the same thing. They're not. Luke is a good pilot, strong in the Force, brave, morally good, and a quick learner. These are certainly ingredients to make a Mary Sue, but he isn't one for a number of reasons. One of them is because of the way that the other characters treat him within the story. Luke is often the butt of Han's jokes.
Who's gonna fly it, kid? You?
Slightly ridiculed for his non-opposing size by Leia, or chided by Yoda for his ignorance, for instance.
His mind on where he was. what he was doing.
He makes mistakes often, and on several occasions, Luke can't make it through a movie without needing to be saved, not once, but multiple times. It takes all 3 movies to truly prop Luke up as the hero archetype because the story never treats him like a hero until he's earned it. Consider for a second that instead of being ridiculed by Han, he's actually admired by him. Consider that in every situation Luke finds himself in, where he needs to be saved, he's somehow able to save himself. Imagine that in Luke's first duel with Vader, he beats him with 0 training. Imagine that no matter what's going on, Luke is on the moral high ground and often has to explain why to his ignorant companions while they stand in awe of him. Rey is a very good example of this. She's a better mechanic than Han and Chewie, better at the Force than Anakin and Luke. She's more honest than Finn, a better pilot than just about everyone, better at lightsaber dueling than Kylo Ren, better at killing Palpatine than Vader, more moral than Old Man Luke, and better at being a Skywalker than all the others.
Rey Skywalker.
It just hurts.
I know that hindsight is 20/20, but it's sometimes shocking when looking back at the sequel trilogy just how terrible the writing really was. It's like when they wrote these movies, they started with how amazing at everything Rey was going to be, and then they spent the rest of the time trying to explain how any of the villains in any of these movies could ever actually pose a threat to this goddess amongst mere mortals. The problem with Mary Sue's, discussed at great length all those years ago in Menagerie, is how ridiculous it all seems when compared to well-written content. It always feels so self-serving to the writers, rather than inspiring for the readers, or watchers in this case for movies and
Who
television.
the hell are you? Jennifer Walters, attorney at law.
Like Ron looking in that mirror at Hogwarts, you know what I'm talking about, the one that shows him being head boy and everybody loves him. It's more unrealistic than the fantasy elements around it.
Good.
Okay, enough dancing around the subject. I said I would talk about it, so here it is. There's another component to the Mary Sue, and it's in the moniker itself. Trigger warning, we're gonna talk about gender roles. More often than not, the hero of a hero's journey is male, and that reflects real life. The heroes of stories are written specifically to be identified with by their reader or viewer. In real life, heroic stories of violence, bravery, and incredible strength are more often than not stories where men are the hero. No amount of modern-day feminism has changed the actual facts. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to diminish what women do for society at large. I genuinely believe that they are far more important than men are, in a more chivalrous kind of way.
For the time being, I shall require only women and children.
But do you know what does diminish men's role in society? The unbelievable, unrealistic, and pandering story trope of the Mary Sue. The hero's journey is a male domain, typically because heroics in real life are a male domain. And while the occasional female hero is perfectly acceptable, nearly no one identifies with so many female hero tropes. So yes, there is a gendered component to the Mary Sue. I mean, come on, you think it's an accident that the moniker began with a woman's name? The point is that Star Wars, and most of Hollywood, is nearly unwatchable today. These writers can't seem to make women strong without being at the expense of men, and without making the story filled with pandering fools only placed there to further the message of how great the Mary Sue character is. What was once a story trope that graced its unbelievable and insufferable characters in fan fiction magazines in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and exists today online in forums and in YouTube fan films where such a silly character concept belongs, the Mary Sue now exists in the mainstream. There it is, a nearly 3-page breakdown describing what a Mary Sue actually is. It's not an archetype, because calling it that destroys the definition of archetype. The Mary Sue is a story trope, whose central hero is a nearly perfect woman who is moral, knowledgeable, and capable character that exists in a story where the supporting cast of characters exists only to further the pre-established hero's multifaceted perfection. The trope isn't an archetype because it isn't timeless, and because it requires a pandering supporting cast. Hopefully that helps to clear some things up. But since we've now got the definition down, the next logical question might be, how did we get here? Sorry this took so long to come out. I didn't take a single day off last year, and after that last video, I needed a break. I might have gone a little overboard, but I'm back. The next videos in this series are already written and recorded, and they will be coming out soon. I made this video and all the subsequent videos for this series because I thought that it would be best to have a solid definition for what the Mary Sue actually is. I wanted to be able to admit that Mary Sues are great at everything, that the supporting cast panders to them, and that they are mostly portrayed by women. I wanted to be able to be honest without being insulting or demeaning to women in general, but I also don't think that we should be scared to admit the truth. There are almost no real Mary Sues that are men, and it's because being a hero is a man's job. Many famous content creators today, might be willing to call Mary Sue and woke movies out, but still don't take that extra step in calling it what it is. It's not just bad writing, which I admit is very bad in films and television today. And it's not just woke ideology, which I also admit is a poison in society and pop culture. The specific and foundational problem with the strong female character is that she's female. Neither women nor men want to watch female heroes. There really are religious, biological, psychological, and practical reasons why it's just plain true, and the more that we say it, the more people will start to see it. So no more excuses because we like Sarah Connor or Ellen Ripley, or Clone Wars Ahsoka Tano for that matter. It's time to just be honest. I'm the Dremexican, and I hope that I've earned your subscription today. God bless. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.